Hey guys, hope all is well. So yeah, this is episode 34 of the Rugby Recap. You have myself, Rugby Itch, as well as the Kiwi lads. First of all, man, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well, mate. 3 games of the Six Nations down. Some close ones scattered throughout there, but also a very one-sided affair to open off the competition. Who saw Ireland winning by 21 points?
Yeah, no one did. I actually don't think anyone saw that coming. And to get a bonus point from that game as well was pretty impressive. So it's going to take a tough beating to kind of, I guess defeat the resigning champs in the moment. But I mean, yeah, that game just yeah, I was surprised, but it's one of those where it came down towards like which player would be a bigger loss, Sexton to Ireland or Dupont to France, and I think a lot of people going into the game actually thought Sexton would be a bigger loss compared to Dupont, just because it's easy out of the game. You're not going to have him anymore, and there's a new 10 in board. Will he be able to kind of take the reign with Jack Crowley? But man, he was superb in my opinion. He was actually my man of the match if I had to give one. But then Dupontless France just did not tick, and they just didn't get anything going. I mean, again, that card obviously just didn't help them in their favor. But what was your thoughts on the game?
I thought Ireland, they definitely looked like the Grand Slam from last year's Six Nations side. France just didn't really show up, unfortunately, which was more surprising because it was in France. But then, saying that, I think this was the first game that Galtier has lost away from Stade de France since taking over the coaching. So it's an interesting one for France at the moment because, of course, you mentioned Dupont and how much of an impact he can have on the side. But there were just so many little things that France were struggling with. Their game up against Scotland this weekend is going to be extremely interesting. Of course, Ireland have got Italy. And to be honest, out of all the Six Nations sides, some would argue Ireland, of course, but I think Italy probably one of the sides that performed the best throughout this first round of the Six Nations, just because no one gave them a chance up against the English. And if they did, people were saying it's because England are going to play poorly. But I think Italy, to stay as close as they did in that game, I think that they did extremely well throughout the first round.
Yeah, no, I was very impressed with Italy in that game against England. I mean, they came straight off the back, obviously scoring those 2 tries, just kind of surprised everyone in terms of that first half. I mean, that try by gosh, who was it? Was it Allen? Or I can't remember who scored that long. I think it was Allen who scored that try at the end to also Allen. And man, that was probably my opinion. I'd say the try of the kind of the round so far to what we had. And yeah, I mean, yeah, the Talents just did well in that first half in particular. But again, the English came back in the second and kind of just did well to kind of disrupt them in terms of their plays for Toje, for Roots. And again, that's where they kind of became a bit more clinical and obviously held on to the end. But hey, they kind of gave that try at the end though. So it was one of those like where it kind of softened the blow really in terms of what the result could have been. But hey, no, I was really impressed by the Italians. They really just look when they're spirited and just have all the momentum with them. There's nothing stopping them. So I was really impressed by them. But hey, England, there's a lot which they can work on, but at the same time, it's a good stepping stone, I'd say, in terms of first game because they did some positive things in their fault when looking back at the game now. But then again, there's a lot of things in which they can kind of tinker with, in my opinion. But yeah, what was overall in terms of that game? Were you impressed by one side more, or just you think it was kind of an even battle throughout?
I think a lot of the games of this first round of the Six Nations did fall into the category of game of two halves. It seemed to be that definitely, I mean, Wales Scotland is the perfect example of a game of two halves.
Yeah.
Scotland almost blew that one, but they managed to hang on just to the final whistle. But England, conceding that last try, I don't think they would have been too happy because now Italy have got themselves the same amount of points as they had throughout the whole of last year's Six Nations just in one game, and they almost walked away with more than just the 1 point throughout that game up against the English. But yeah, some individual players. It seemed to be the young guys in both those 2 games that did step up, the likes of Joe McCarthy for the Irish. I believe he got man of the match. Ethan Roots, I think, got man of the match in the English contest. So those young guys on debut, perhaps, I mean, for Wales as well, could be a few of those guys, future stars.
Yeah. No, it's impressive. Like, I mean, like going towards that Wales Scotland game, I mean, that game, like you said, was really a game of two halves where I think I saw like in the post conference from one Gallen, he even said a quote saying like how that was probably the worst half of rugby he's ever coached Wales in terms of that first half against Scotland. But again, they kind of turned it around. He must have said something in terms of the changing rooms to kind of get them switched on and all that. Yeah, I mean, they definitely came back into it, and it was good rugby actually that they were playing as well. Like the tries they scored was just good build up. Everything was just executed perfectly. So yeah, it's definitely something again similar towards Italy and kind of England in a way, which they can build off going into the second round, because it's one of those where I think all these sides, like I mean, particularly I'd say Italy, England game, and Scotland, Wales, obviously were much closer of games compared towards that Ireland France one, but. Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see what happens in round two, of course, because, Ireland, of course, do lead the leaderboard at the moment and in first place. But in terms of the rest of the pile, it's still kind of there's a few ins and outs there, and it's all kind of unpredictable still, I'd say. But yeah, besides that, we'll kind of go straight into, I guess, kind of the fixtures, obviously, for this round in terms of round two of the Six Nations. We'll first start off with, I believe, the first game, if I'm not mistaken, is Scotland versus France. So that's a big one. That's a big one to start off with. Just tell me your thoughts first of overall about the game. Just like the lineups as well. Just what do you think overall?
Well, you normally don't want to face France after they've just lost. That seems to be something we have learned in the past. But I think that Scotland, that second half showed that when their discipline isn't on point, it can really get out of hand, because I think it was about 10-1 in terms of that penalty count throughout the second half, and they just kept on going, penalty after penalty, and then eventually finding themselves with 2 men in the bin. But Duan van der Merwe, I was happy to see that he was heavily involved for the Scottish. He actually really searched for work, which I was concerned about, but luckily
he was great.
He did end up getting involved. Just a shame he couldn't get that last try to give them the bonus point for the Scottish, but he tried. That's the main thing. But I think for France, couple changes. Belbari comes into the left wing side. Thomas Ramos still at fullback. Maxime Luku, I feel like a lot of people felt he didn't quite perform in that first game up against the Irish, but then that ruck speed from France, I think, really was on the back foot compared to Ireland. Like, they were very quick in getting that ball straight in, straight out, and that was applying pressure to the French backs, who, to be honest, once again, weren't quite where they would have liked to be. Cameron Walkie into the starting lineup, I think, is a good choice as well for France, seeing as now they don't have Valimza.
I mean, that game overall, like, you could just, we'll obviously go on to it when we talk about Ireland, but just Ireland just really did well to kind of disrupt the French in terms of line-outs, of course, with Williams also being sent off with the yellow card, and then for the rest of the game, obviously off with the second yellow. It just meant that their set pieces overall throughout the game was just lacking, and they really did miss someone like Paul Williams in that game. So, yeah, look, I mean, having someone like Cameron Walkie to come on and start in this one is definitely going to be a big boost for them. But it's one of those where, yeah, you're facing the likes of the Scottish now. And if I'm not mistaken, they now have Gilchrist, who's now back in the side now for Scotland as well. So that's kind of an upgrade, in my opinion, I'd say, in terms of locking positions for Scotland. So it's going to be another tough battle in terms of those locks. And, yeah, like you mentioned, I mean, like with Scotland as well, Duan van der Merwe in good form at the moment. Tubeloto I thought was pretty good. I mean, it's crazy. I'm actually looking at the loose forward pack here for Scotland. And again, you have the likes of, Rory Darge at 7, Mac Baggerson at number 6, and Jack Dempsey number 8. But it's crazy how, like, you have players like Hamish Watson, who, I mean, a few seasons ago was like player of the tournament, really. I think it was like 2021 or something like that. And then you have like the likes of James Ritchie, who was previously captain, and now he's not even part of the 23-man squad. So it's kind of crazy to see that, in a good way, that Scotland have a bit of depth, I guess, in terms of that position, which they can kind of capitalize on. But yeah, no, it's gonna be fascinating to see how they go in this one. Yeah, I mean, I actually, to be fair, I actually didn't see much. Maybe I'm mistaken. You can obviously tell me if I'm wrong on that front, but I didn't see much of Carl Rowe in terms of that 15th spot for Scotland. Like, did you see much of him in terms of that game against Wales? Or
I think the first half we saw quite a bit of him joining the line. It seemed to be the two Kyles on the near side of the field were getting heavily involved. To be honest, Kyle Rowe, when you look at him though, he does look like a very generic individual in the nicest way possible. So it might have been that meant that you didn't see him stand out too much. But Yeah, first half he was relatively good. Second half just didn't exist because every breakdown was a penalty, so
Exactly.
never really got the chance to get the ball.
But yeah, no, I guess just going on to following on into this game, like who would you say is your kind of ones to watch player? We'll do both, obviously, for both sides. So just give us, I guess, your two in terms of this game.
Well, I'm going to see if I jinx him or not, but Duan van der
Yeah.
Merwe, surely after
Okay.
he's done that last week, he's got to back it up. And if he's able to do so, I think he'll have a very successful day going head-to-head with Damien Pinot. So there could be tries scored very often out on that side.
Good matchup.
But you know what? I went Damien Pinot last week, so I won't go with him again. Instead, I'll go to the other wing, Louis Belbarri, as the man to watch out for. Didn't actually play much in the first contest. Got a few minutes late, but seems to be a much better player when he starts rather than coming off the bench. So I'm going to give him that jersey and give him the pressure of being a key player.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Fair enough. I mean, to be fair, I actually can't remember who I selected in terms of this game, in terms of the key players for that Scotland-Wales game. I think I did say, I might have even said Finn Russell, I think, just as a simple one, just because it's, it's Finn Russell. He's going to change the game inside and out, and that's kind of what he was able to do in that Welsh game. But I think for this game, I'm going to look. I mean, the key battle, which I'm looking at in this one, is really the 12s in terms of Tupeloto versus Dante. I think that's going to be a great kind of battle in terms of the midfield of this game. But yeah, I mean, Hugh Jones is good against was good for Scotland as well against Viku. I mean, well, it's tough. There's a lot of good players here. You know what? Actually, I'm actually going to say Rory Darge is the player I'm looking out for. I'd say for Scotland this one in terms of that 7 spots. He's always been an intriguing player for me. And again, he's still kind of young, so I kind of want to see what he'll be able to do in this one. And again, he's one of the co-captains, of course. But I guess for the French, I mean, I didn't see too much of Dante, I'd say, in that previous one because he kind of made a fumble, he made a few mistakes. So hopefully he can kind of bounce back in this one. So I'll probably say he's the guy I'm looking out for in this one in terms of from the French perspective. But yeah, just kind of the finish off, obviously, in terms of this game. What is your kind of prediction for this one? Do you think the Scottish will win at home, or do you think the French will cause an upset?
It's a tricky one, isn't it? Because you have to assume that Scotland are going to play like they did, hopefully, in the first half rather than the second.
Exactly.
The French, I don't know, you maybe say their second half was the better, but it still wasn't fantastic for them. And they actually seemed to get better when they had 14 men on the field. So there's a lot to determine who's going to win this game. And it's more of the question of how much of a home field advantage will Murrayfield bring for the Scottish. And you'd have to say it's quite a big amount of advantage when they're playing in Scotland. So I'm going to say, even though France should win, I'm going to say that Scotland end up winning this game at 29 points to 23.
Ooh, okay, so that's a high-scoring game. That's a high-scoring game.
But we've seen both of these sides leak a few tries in quick succession, so I'll go with that.
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, when I look back in terms of the history of this game, I mean, the last time I think Scotland did beat France was during that COVID year in terms of, I think it was like 2020, 2021 or something like that. So, yeah, they haven't done it in a while at home. That was the kind of last time they beat them. But I don't know. I mean, I'm actually kind of aligned with you in this one, where I actually think Scotland can get the job done in this. Hopefully, if they can kind of replicate what we saw in that first half against Wales. But again, you just don't know with France because they're such a good team. And again, we kind of didn't see the full package, I'd say, in terms of that first game against Ireland, because again, most of the time they were without one player. So it's not really a fair reflection on terms of what they can actually bring in this one. But yeah, I'm going to hedge my bet towards Scotland still. I think I'm still going to hedge my bet towards Scotland. I think it'll be a close game, like you said. Maybe not as high scoring as you predicted, but I'm going to go with a scoreline of maybe like 25 points to like 22, something around there. But yeah, it's still going to be interesting to see what happens.
Just taking a few points off.
Just taking a few points off, I don't like the 29. I was like, whoa, 29. I'm just like, I'm not sure they'll concede that much, but hey, you never know. You never know. But I'll say 25, 22. Separated by a penalty in that way. But yeah, no. Well, anyway, we'll move on then towards the next one, which of course is England versus Wales. Of course, arguably one of the biggest matchups you could say in rugby history, but of course one of the big ones in terms of the Six Nations. And yeah, this is a big one. I mean, again, this is the first game, of course, England will be playing at Twickenham, and for 2024, and they're gonna need to produce something here. I think this is a big game for them, not just for this game overall, but I think for the whole year in general, because this is something that which they can kind of build their platform off in terms of everything they do. But yeah, I mean, it's tough because I mean I've seen England. I actually thought they'd make a few changes. Maybe I'm wrong, but I actually thought they would have made a few changes going from their side from what we saw last week. But they've actually gone with an unchanged side in terms of that starting 15, and I'm a bit surprised, I'd say. I mean, I'm not gonna go in too much into the players, but again, I'm pretty. There's some players that did impress me, I'd say, in that one. You know, with Freeman, I thought had a good game against Italy, kind of did well in terms of that wing spot. Same with Elliot Daly as well. I thought Freddie Stewart was pretty good in terms of the high balls. So that back three does look like it's kind of working well. So they can kind of continue that kind of chemistry. That should do the job. But yeah, I guess in terms of that, I mean, George Ford obviously was done pretty well. It'll be interesting to see how when Marcus Smith gets introduced in this game, because that could kind of vary how this game kind of goes towards the latter stages of this one. But yeah, besides that, I mean, obviously, I mean, what's your thoughts in terms of, I guess, the Welsh perspective going into this one?
Well, I think that they should theoretically have their tails up a little bit after that second half up against the Scottish, because they almost did what absolutely no one was thinking they would be able to do, and that was come back from what was a abysmal first half, but they almost did it. And when they were clicking, they actually seemed to look like a very strong side, even though they have got so many changes. No Dan Biggar, no Liam Williams, no Jack Morgan. There's a lot of players out that would normally be in that starting lineup, but it seemed to be those younger guys, once again, who were stepping up. You know, Daff Jenkins, I thought that he had a few good moments throughout that second half. Aaron Wainwright, a man who was invisible for the first 40, all of a sudden was casting a massive shadow over everyone throughout that second 40 minutes. Mm-hmm. But I think that they'll be excited for this challenge of going into this game up against the English. They're away from home. You wonder how much of an impact that Principality Stadium singing did have on the Welsh. I feel like that was something that was slightly pushing them that little bit harder. And I also think that England's discipline will be a bit stronger than the Scottish discipline was throughout that second half. So it's one of those cases of if Wales can put their foot down early and actually, you know, score some points in the first 40, I think that they'll have a lot more success playing in this game. But will it be enough to beat the English?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I mean, when I look at the lineup here in terms of the Welsh lineup, I mean, they do have the addition, I believe, of George North back into the side now in terms of that centre position with Nick Tompkins. So I honestly think that's probably the best combination Wales can go with. So I'm pretty excited to see how that kind of works in this game, because going against the likes of Slade as well as, gosh, how forgot his name? Help me here.
Everyone has. It's Dingwall.
Dingwall, that's it, yeah.
Dingwall, like, the man who we didn't see in the game up against Italy.
Exactly, yeah. So that's actually wait. Is it an unchanged? Actually, was he part of it?
No, he was a part of it. We just didn't see him.
Exactly.
We saw him miss one tackle at the end, and that was it.
Yeah, he's probably the player in terms of that game you just didn't see much of. But yeah, well, I mean, I honestly think the Nick Tompkins George North is a better combination than that in terms of what England have in terms of the centres. I mean, obviously, shoot me down if I'm wrong in that one, but I guess in terms of the loose forwards, I thought they were brilliant. I think it was a really good loose forward, I'd say, performance in that game, in that first game. I mean, Aaron Wainwright, of course, was, I thought, just great overall. Got the try, of course, to kind of close the game, kind of make the game a bit closer. Tommy Rafael, of course, got a lot of the kind of balls within the breakdown, did pretty well to kind of disrupt the play. And then you have Alex Mann as well. Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. I'm trying to think in terms of the matchups, like who kind of has whose number in that sense. But yeah, I guess kind of just going into the kind of the ones watch players for this one, who's kind of the one that's kind of keeping your eye out for in terms of both sides?
Well, I feel like for England, Freddie Stewart is going to be very important, because we may see a bit more of a kicking-orientated game plan from the Welsh. Definitely at Twickenham, I feel like that's somewhere that you want to try and slow the game down a little bit more and try and get that control of territory early. But Freddie Stewart's boot and also his ability under the high ball normally makes it very hard to get England on the back foot in terms of that territory game, although Italy seemed to do it not too badly throughout the first half of last week's contest. For the Welsh, like you've said, Nick Tompkins, George North in the midfield are going to be very handy, but I think that Cameron Winnett the man at number 15. He was a player who no one really knew too much about.
Yeah.
Came into that game last week and, he probably didn't have his greatest performance, but he was still there at times when he was needed. And I think as he gets more opportunities for Wales, he'll slowly grow into that jersey. And I think he is still growing because he looks like he's about 12. But I think that he's going to be a very handy player for the Welsh throughout this game. So battle with the fullbacks. See who ends up getting the better of it.
Yeah, no, I was kind of thinking the same thing, by the way, when I first saw him. I was like, who's this guy? Like, come and win it. I was like, he looks pretty young but I know I actually thought he actually had a good game against the Scottish. I actually even put him in my team of the week in terms of my channel. But yeah, I guess when looking at the Welsh, God, there's so many players you can mention here. The locks have to do pretty well because if you're going against the likes of a Toja, you need to do pretty well in those lineouts. The loose forwards have to step it up, I'd say. I'm looking at Aaron Wainwright, really. I want to say Rio Dye for some reason, but I think it's going to come down towards the forwards maybe in this game. So I actually am going to go with Aaron Wainwright as my kind of once-watch player for Wales. But in terms of the English, I'm trying to think who could do well in this one. Alex Mitchell, maybe? I don't know. He didn't have as good of a game I thought as he could have, I'd say, against the Italians. I know he got a try, but it's one of those like where there's games where you can tell you weren't able to make as big of an impact as you want. I don't know. Maybe George Ford has to do pretty well. Slade has to do well in his kicking. You know what? I'm going to go with the obvious answer here, but I'm actually going to go with George Ford, I think, just because I think it's going to come down towards kicking within this game. And if he's not on points, then that could cost him. So I'm going to go with George Ford. But yeah, just in terms of the prediction for this game, I'll start off, of course, with this one. I do think. See, this is a tough one. I mean, off the back, I just want to say the English because they're playing at home. Obviously, home for the kind of home advantage that kind of comes into their mind. But Wales, you can't really underestimate them, and they really proved a lot of people wrong. I'd say in that first game because I think a lot of people just favored the Scottish completely going into that game, even with the history obviously behind it, not in their favor. But still, the Scottish were backed as the huge favorites for that one. But for this one, I don't know. I haven't seen the odds for this, but I would assume England is favorites going into this game. But oh my gosh, I kind of want to say Wales. I actually want to say Wales, but it just doesn't make sense because I can't do it. I gotta say England. So I'm gonna say England to win, and I'll say they'll win this game 21 points to 16. 21 points to 16 in favor of the English.
Alrighty, well, they do come in as favourites, the English, $1.18 compared to Wales, who are $5 underdogs. So actually, relatively big split. Fun fact, we actually both backed the underdog in Scotland versus France. Scotland come in as the $2.50 underdog for that matchup. But for me, I'm also in that same boat of backing the English. I think that they'll just be that little bit too strong, and I want to say that their structure should get them over the line.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a close game again, though. But then that first half, you think about that when they played the Scottish, the Welsh, and you think, well, that just didn't look good. So if that happens, then England could get themselves in the 30s. But I'm going to say 28-19 in favour of the English.
Wow, so that's a good win for the English then.
Yeah, I think that Wales, unfortunately, I don't think lightning's going to strike twice for them. Okay. I think that home crowd really helped them take it to that next level. That's not to say that they can't do it again. In fact, that is one of those games that score could honestly be reversed if Wales do show up and play well. But, yeah, I'm going to go with the English.
Yeah. I'm not going to say that's not a bad shout because, I actually didn't see this beforehand, but I noticed that they haven't gone with Costo, obviously, within that 10 spot. They put Lloyd in, actually, who I actually haven't seen before. So that's going to be a new one to kind of watch out for me. But I thought he was pretty good, actually, in that game against the Scottish. So surprised they actually made that switch. But maybe there's an...
I think it was because Costello got knocked out, didn't he? Or he got an HIA against...
Oh, of course. How did I forget that? Yeah. What am I on about? Yeah.
He would have too.
Yes. Exactly. How did I forget that? Yeah, no, because I thought he was pretty impressive, like for what I saw for the early start of the game. But yeah. How kind of forget that bit. But anyway, we're moving on towards the final one, of course, which is Ireland versus Italy. Again, this is the only game that, as we're filming now, guys, the both sides haven't been announced, but we can kind of suspect, I say, for the Italians that they're going to go with a side which is kind of similar to what we saw within that opening game. Again, I don't think, was there any injuries for the Italians that I can't remember. Was there any? I don't think there was.
Not a huge amount, I don't
think.
think.
No, actually, there was. I just saw this on the thing that, I mean, Sebastian Negri, of course, is still kind of a bit injured, so he's not available to play. But I saw Lorenzo
Canoni.
Canoni, he's out. I saw he's out for this one. So that's a big loss for them because he's actually a good player in terms of number 8 position. But yeah, so yeah, again, it's one of those like where I think besides that they'll have their full strength team, and I think Ange Capuzzo would be back in this one to what I suspect because he was obviously just out for the previous game because of illness, so he should be okay for this one if I'm not mistaken. But then yeah, in terms of the Irish, again, I'm trying to think of any injuries on their side. I mean, I did see there's a bit of a doubt for Peter Amani. I'm not sure if that's we'll see what happens there. Because obviously that would be a big loss if they weren't able to have him. But again, they have a lot of depth in that position anyway in terms of loose forwards, so it's not too big of an issue, I'd say. But yeah, just kind of what's your perspective of this game overall?
Well, Ireland at home is pretty impressive normally, and the fact that they are even impressive away from home now makes it a bit of a concern for Italy, who haven't been known as the best travelling side. In front of a home crowd, they're pretty handy, but as soon as they get on the road, seems to go downhill, plus the fact, like you've said, they're missing 2 out of their 3 loose forwards. So the fact that the only man left is Lamaro makes it a little bit concerning because that's somewhere that Ireland will look to really push the tempo and also bring that physicality. That's something that they did well up against the French. They were getting in the breakdowns and really trying to cause disruption. I don't think that if they're losing Peter O'Mahony, they'll be two-faced, mainly because of, like you said, the depth that they've got. Worst comes to worst, call up Gavin Coombs, who had an absolute blinder in the game up against the Crusaders.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not going to hurt Ireland that much, I don't think.
Yeah.
And I know Peter O'Mahony, he's a great player, but the fact that they still have so many guys, Jack Conan could come in,
they got
reshuffle of some sort.
They're all good.
They'll be fine, and they will win this game comfortably, is my prediction. But of course, we will get to the predictions in the near future. How do you think this one's going to go, Tim? Think Ireland have it?
I don't know. I mean, I'll be cheering for the Italians, of course, in this game, but it's one of those like where I mean, you are right. Losing, kind of not having 2 of your big loose forwards is a big loss for the Italians. But I do think with Ange Capuzzo, it kind of adds that kind of X factor element, which they didn't have in that first game. Because again, they actually were pretty good tries they scored, but it's one of those like where Ange Capuzzo is he's just a different level in terms of a player, and he's young. He's just so good. And I've watched a lot of his games recently in terms of the highlights and that, and he's still performing pretty well. So I think he can honestly. I think he's going to change the Italian back line in a good way, I'd say, for this game. But again, by doing that, it could mean that it's a bit more open. So I don't know. Maybe it's in Ireland's favor in that sense. But I will say, I mean, we're going to go straight. We have to talk about the ones to watch. We're going just kind of off topic. I want to say the prediction already. But for the ones to watch player, I mean, for me, I'm just going to go off the back. I'm looking at Ange Capuzzo. Simple as that. He is the one I'm definitely looking out for in this game to kind of turn on the afterburners and make the Italians kind of I don't know, just go off really. But I guess in terms of the for the Irish, I want to say Jack Crowley, but the thing is that like he was so good in that game where I think it's wrong. I don't really want to choose him for this one because it's just I think there's a better player I can go with. Maybe Jack Conan because he may be the replacement for Peter O'Mahony in this one. But again, we don't know obviously the squad, so maybe he's not even selected at all. But I mean, Tag Burr, by the way, we haven't even mentioned him, but he was, I think, out of all the players this week, in my opinion, I think he was probably up there with the best. Maybe only Jack Crowley, I'd say, is probably better than him, I'd say, in the whole round. I think he was just so good against France, just disrupting everything they had. And just, he was really good to watch. But, I mean, I'm kind of lost for words here. I don't know who to choose in terms of this Ireland squad. You know what? I'll say Bundyaki, just because I don't think Bundyaki, we saw a lot of him within that first game. So I'm hoping that he kind of just just the leashes are off essentially, and just kind of he just goes full front at this game. But yeah, what about you?
Well, for the Italians, I'm going to go with Tommaso Allen. Don't know where he's going to be playing because, of course, if Capuzzo is
I
back,
was
there
gonna
is
say,
a chance they put him at fullback. Allen might actually go out to one of the wings, perhaps, in this game, or they may even look at him as a 10 or a 12. That
I'd
seems
say
to be
12 is
something.
probably if he's going to play, it's going to be 12, I'd say, because the wingers are covered. 10, they
Yeah.
obviously have for BC. 15, you're going to put Capuzzo. So unless he's
Although,
not playing,
I think
this is obviously
Capuzzo, they did put out on the wing during the World Cup, didn't they? They did that bit of a reshuffle.
Yeah, actually, you're right. They're right.
So-
They did do that. They did Monty, and then they put Monty only as the 11. But then who did they have as the other winger in terms of this game? They had but then actually they're not even going to put him at 12. I just remember because they had what's his name?
Juan Bricks.
Moniacio, who was probably, in my opinion, probably player of that game. So yeah, no, it makes sense actually what you're saying. Maybe Tommy Allen at 15 makes what they may do. But what about them for the Irish? Who's your kind of player there?
I should mention, even if he's not on the starting lineup, off the bench, he should still be strong because
he'll do
very
pretty
handy player. Tommaso Allen, I would say for the Irish, I'm looking, like you just look through this whole score and you say they're all pretty decent, aren't they?
Exactly.
There's
Like
no real
one of them
weak
could do
links. The loose forward trio, I think because we're not going to see as much resilience perhaps from the Italians as we were going to see much more of the Irish firepower. So I'm going to say, I want to say it's a 50-50 between Josh Van den Flair and Caelan Doris.
Yeah.
And because we're the bosses, I'm going to allow it. So, yeah, both of them in that loose forward trio. I feel like one of them's going to handle Lamato, the other one's going to run Rampage.
Okay. If I had to pick one, by the way, I would say Doris just because, yeah, I just think Doris, this is kind of the game for him, I think. But I could be wrong. Maybe it's Josh Mander for this game, but I just have a funny feeling that he's going to get a lot of running meters in this one. But yeah, anyway, moving on, just to finish off this one in terms of the prediction. Going to you, what is your prediction for this game?
Well, how nice do we want to be to the
Exactly.
Italians?
This is you want to be very careful
question.
Here. You want to be very careful here.
You know what? If they do better, then I'm happily going to accept it. I'm going to say the score will be 41 points to 13.
Okay. I actually, in a weird way, was thinking like 40 mark as well. So that's a bit. Maybe I don't say 40 now. Maybe I go just something a bit generous. Maybe I'll say 38. I think they make it the same thing as what they got in the first round. I'll say 38. And 38 points to Ireland, and I'll say, jeez, I'll just say 8. 38-8. To the Italians,
Brutal.
I know. Look, I want them to do better, of course. I would love them to get into the 20s if possible, like they got in the first round. But I just think Ireland they're going to do some damage here. But I kind of want to say 12 now, but no, I'm going to stick to my guns. 38-8. That's my prediction. But yeah, anyway, we'll leave it there, guys. Again, obviously, let us know in the comments what you think in terms of who will win this round, and just tell us your thoughts on the Six Nations on the whole. Like, what was your kind of thoughts going on in that first round, and kind of who do you guys think will obviously win these Six Nations now, seeing the performances we've seen so far. But yeah, besides that, make sure to obviously check out the Kiwi Lads. Make sure to check out my channel, TheRugbyRecapYT. Make sure to like and subscribe towards this channel, and yeah, we'll see you guys next time.